Welcome to the LitRPG Audiobook Dungeon Special Part 3. Today, we have numerous dungeon-related books for your listening enjoyment. They will be reviewed on a fair and crunchy status as you've never seen before. But first, before the show begins, I must call in my minions of mischief and mayhem. Minions, arise! Minions, I would like you two to go out into the world and cause mischief and mayhem. Do you think that you can do that, the two of you?
Yes, Master. Yes, Master.
Very good. Thank you. Go and destroy mischief, mayhem, madness. And we'll be right back.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to a very special third edition of the Dungeon Special for the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast. My name is Ray, and today I'm going to be reviewing exclusively dungeon books just for you. First book up is going to be what? Well, it had to be this, just because we're saying farewell to a very old friend, someone very dear to us. Cal the Dungeon has come to a conclusion. Dungeon Eternium, the Divine Dungeon Series, Book 5, by Dakota Kraut. This is it. This is the last book of the series. This is narrated by Luke Daniels, so we're having a bit of a shift at the very end with a book length of 10 hours and 7 minutes.
Thanks, little guy. I'm learning so much today. Then he punched down and siphoned off some essence using the runes on his gauntlet. The cat, suddenly weakened and dizzy, stumbled away, only to be met with a heavy blow that made everything go black for it. Dale swiftly added another cord to his bag and walked out of the portal. Huh. Normally I come out and really enjoy the fresh air. Ooh, what changed? Something stinks. Dale! A voice Dale still flinched at broke his peaceful mood, and Minya appeared in front of him. I knew if I waited around here you would show up. Didn't you ask Cal? The mithril-clad mage asked with crossed arms. You can't possibly still hold that against me, Minya asserted while matching his hard look. I know what you've been up to, and all the benefits that you're getting from working with him. You know that there are a lot of people who hate you now, ever since your talk with the master in public about sharing a soul with the dungeon.
I tell you, this is just one of those really bittersweet novels. This is the book that really broke me into the dungeon genre, so to speak, and it's been one hell of a roller coaster ride for me. I mean, seriously, it's been ups and downs through the whole series. There were some amazing novels, and some that just kind of felt a little hurried here or there in some spots. And all I can say is I'm going to sorely miss this series. The characters, Cal and Danny, are so ingrained in my heart. I mean, I love Danny so much, even though she's kind of trailed off into the background as almost a tertiary character by this book. She has very little to do and had less to do after she was captured in the earlier books. So if that's a spoiler, I apologize. But Danny has an arc, and she's trimmed down more and more as the series going on, but she's totally my favorite character in the series. And like I said, I'm going to miss this, but I'm comforted knowing that even as this book ends, I kind of have an impression that we may get some more in the same thing later on. There's nothing that says that Cal can't return, that we can't go back. We don't know what happens. Even at the end of the book, the series, we don't have a final what happens to the world kind of thing. In like nothing happens in the book that says definitively this is what happened when the meteor struck. Nothing there. So there's a whole lot of things that could occur. I'm assuming there's going to be some desolation, some destruction, some calamity. So that's going to happen. But I think that, there's going to be time that passes. They are in a special place now, and Cal can kind of weather the storm until things get better back on their world. So I think there's a lot of hope at the end that they're going to come back. And at this point, there's no spoilers. I can pretty much say that there will be other things coming, because we know for a fact there's a Divine Dungeon anthology coming out rather soon. Next month, beginning of the month, the Divine Dungeon anthology Essence will be out. So that kind of picks up and carries on the torch, so to speak, with Cal and Danny's characters, or the world, or however you want to put it. So it's not truly gone at this point. So Crow can come back in any capacity he likes in the future, although the world may not be in the same place or the same state as he left it. Okay, why? Because the moon is falling, as we know from the last two books, and this is not a Chicken Little type tale. And again, if this is a spoiler, I have to reveal this, because this is what the whole premise of the book is. And the only hope that anybody has of escaping the destruction of the entire world is for them to make their way into Cal's soul space. The problem is that there's a lot of infighting and outside influences that make it very difficult for him to just kind of welcome everyone into him as much as he would love to, because by taking them all in, he gets all kind of benefits and boons and sort of things. And we kind of see him, growing exponentially in power as the book goes, but not in crazy, stupid ways. It's not like you see him just say, oh, well, I'm going from this rank to that rank to that rank, just because. He still hasn't made the ultimate ranks, so you kind of see, again, there's a lot more hope that we'll get stuff in the future. Kraut really does a great job of tying up plot points, though, and setting up things that will only make sense if you read his other series, The Completionist Chronicles. In fact, there's a whole bit in here that I loved, because I just finished Rexus, and I could see how this literally moved over to that book, and the things that happened here played out there in specific ways. So, if you're not sure what goes on, they're tied together in a specific way that I don't want to reveal. But the things that happened in Cal's world happen in the completionist world too. And the whole people thing, it kind of makes sense to me now. It's like Cal and Danny and Dale, they all kind of get like these satisfying conclusions, or maybe not so satisfying, depending on how you look at it. Because with Dale, I don't know if I'd be happy or not. It's kind of hard to say. Although it isn't all happy ending kind of stuff. Some of my favorite parts were, kind of finally learning what the Silverwood tree did, for example. In Cal's misguided attempt to teach a Northman a lesson has severe repercussions later on. And Danny's weird brother. Danny has a brother, and he just pops up out of nowhere. We also kind of get to see what happens to all the bad guys, like the Master and what's the Adventurer Guild's guy's name? I can't think of his name off the top of my head. The Devourer. Is it Frank? Is it Frank the Devourer? I can't remember, but he has an ending, so to speak, in the novel. So like all the good guys, the bad guys, everybody, it all wraps up really neatly. This has been pretty well plotted out, and it feels fresh and focused, as compared to the last couple books where I kind of thought they felt rushed and hurried. This did not have that tone or feel to me at all. This really feels like it was planned out from the very beginning, and we got to this point, and we actually slowed down a little bit, took our breath, and did this right. And I was very happy with that. Just so happy with this. And the only part that really made me pause for a second was when Cal kept doing dungeon stuff, when all the craziness was going on around him with the people in the world. And then I realized that was pretty much exactly what Cal would do. He would just do dungeon stuff. He would dungeon fight all day long, just to keep himself focused and calm until he was able to actually do something constructive. So the book is satisfying, and while a page is kind of turned, the cover doesn't feel like it's been closed completely. So we may get more Danny and Cal in the future. So how do I do this? Here's the part that I'm really sure you've all been waiting to hear. We all know that something occurred with Vicus Adams and Dakota, and they were unable to continue their partnership. anything that you're going to hear is going to be rumor, conjecture, because Dakota will not talk about it, and Vicus has not spoken about it. And I don't claim by any means or stretch of the imagination to have insider information. So I don't know what happened. All I know is that they went to do this book, and Vicus was unable or unwilling or whatever to do the final novel in the time that they wanted to have it done. That meant they had to go elsewhere. And while I would like to believe everything happened was amicable, I will say this, and I'm not going to give a webpage out or anything like that. There is a posting on Reddit, so if you want to go look it up. That kind of details the events that may or may not have happened, because I don't know who posted it. I don't know how they know what they know. But if it's true, and I really do believe that, Dakota's an honorable man, and that he did everything he could to have kept his listeners happy, then, it puts things more on the other side of the fence on like why the narration did not continue. And like I say, I don't know what happened or who, this is not a he said, she said, or he said kind of story. It's just a very sad events occurred that made it impossible for us to continue our partnership together at this point. I don't know if that means they can never work together again, but I do know that he won't be doing Completionist Chronicles anymore, because Luke also kind of stepped in and did Rexus, and I'm assuming he's going to continue doing more of the Completionist Chronicles in the future. So, who knows? I just know that the main thing is Dakota was kind of put behind the 8 ball. He was kind of given no options or alternatives other than to do everything he could to keep his series going when he should have just been able to have it taken care of. So I give him a lot of credit for that. Now, that said, I have to say what I think of Luke Daniels' job narrating. Now, I'm sure you understand, I have enjoyed Luke on numerous series, including Tamer, Magic 2.0, The Iron Druid, and so on. And I get why they picked him. I mean, after all, he did a great job on Boyce's Advent novel. Fantastic job. So he's well known. He does a great job. He's super professional. So I can see exactly why they picked Luke for this spot. But I do have a few things to say. First, he just does not do Dani very well. I often could not recognize Dani when she was speaking, and I have to admit that I missed the way that, she would chastise Cal or whine out his name. Cal! Like, that was just totally gone. The magic for me was kind of lost in that translation. And I also realized that this kind of got dumped on his lap at, get it done ASAP at the last second. Tag attached, so he clearly did not have the ability to even attempt to replicate the voices of the main characters. For example, when Nick Podell took over doing the voices for William Moran's Super Sale and Superheroes, he went out and did his best to try to match up voices and accents as he went along. Even trying to get the word pancakes right. I give him a lot of credit for that, but Daniels doesn't do that here, and I really think that's just due to time constraints. I don't know if he would have been willing to sit down and listen to 2 or 3 novels that are 17 hours or 15 hours or 12 hours apiece to say, okay, I know what this character sounds like. Instead, he just kind of makes up the voices and accents as he goes along. And again, I totally get it, but if you've been a listener of the series from the very beginning, it is kind of jarring. And I'm sure that after like 2 or 3 or 4 listenings, it'll be smoother in my mind because I'll know who's talking, and it won't be quite like, is that Dani coming in? Is that, a Boblin? Because, just as an example, the Boblins, whenever they spoke, I always thought they had like this Native American kind of speaking way of doing things, like, oh, great spirit, we are navigating, and I can't do it that well, but you get the impression, they would speak with that kind of an accent. And here, it isn't even close to that. There's not even a try or something like that. So I knew he did not have time to do what he should have, to do his homework, or if he even had the inclination to do so. I mean, honestly, if I'm taking over for somebody else, and I'm going to be the one in charge of that series from that point forth, would I want to put in the time to learn what they sounded like? or would I just make up stuff on the fly for myself and maintain from that point forward? I think I'd probably do the latter, as much as I hate to admit it, because I would rather somebody actually put forth the effort and make it as cohesive as possible. But I just don't see Luke, being as busy as he is, having the time to do that. So again, I understand exactly why this came out the way it did. Luke does a good job. Otherwise, especially for coming into the series so late, he does a really, really solid job. I just wish that he could have had a little bit more time to get things ready, but the cold hard facts are that the longer a book goes without having the audio come out, the less interest the normal people have in getting that audiobook. People like myself, who that's all we do are audiobooks, I'm happy to wait 3 years if I get my narrator. Like James Marsters, who was Spike and Buffy, does the Dresden Files. They literally had to go back and re-record him doing a book that somebody else did when he was unable to do recording in the time that was necessary for it to be published. Because the fans literally snapped and were like, "This book sucks. We don't want the new narrator," which was Glover, John Glover, which is a great actor. He's got a great voice. I can tell you, he probably did a fantastic job. But we like to stand by our narrators because of unity and cohesion. Here, that's no longer possible. It's a sad thing. I will say that as invested as I am in this series, it was a little harder for me to adjust to Luke comparison-wise to Rexus, which I'll say that later on in another review in the future, where he kind of steps in and he's playing, Jackson, the chiropractor, because the majority of the characters are all new and fresh. I think the only time you see Joe is right towards the end of the book, or maybe at the very beginning, and then bookending it at the end. So, everybody else, there's really no conflict there. It's only here when you have every single character that's been in the series practically popping up that you would have that issue. So I give them a lot of credit because they wanted to make sure the fans got their audiobook, because I've been jonesing for it since the book was published. I've really wanted this, and if I hadn't gotten it, I would have been really upset that there was no opportunity for me to get to see the final end for Cal, because like I said, everybody knows I can't read. With every way my life is, I don't have time. I literally can read. I'm an extremely fast reader, but I just don't have time to sit down to read. And with all the other things happening in my life now, that is even less. That's actually more of the case where I have less time to do so. So I have to have the audiobook to come to me in order for me to enjoy a series. So they had to put this out. I totally respect it, and I know where they're coming from. I'm just not happy that we had to have this come to this point at the very last novel. And again, if you want to see what happens, go look up on Reddit, and you can make a justification for whether you believe or not what they say there. But either way, Luke does a fine job, and I think that if they do continue this series some point in the future, it's going to be amazing. Okay, I just think that now that it's out of the way and it's locked down, we should be solid. Overall, for a series finale, this was a very satisfying story, and the only thing that really gives it a ding, if you will, is the narration switch, which is necessary and understandable and hard to overlook. So final score would have been more, but you have to admit there's a scratch on the side of the car there. So it's an 8.4 stars. So it could have been a classic, became a family car. Still good, still dependable, still enjoyable. It's just not as cool. Yeah, it's funny because I'm recording all this and it's kind of in a jumble. So I just completed my review of book 3 for Dungeon World, and now doing Dungeon World 2. So it's kind of weird doing it like this. This will be Dungeon World 2, A Dungeon Core Experience by Jonathan Brooks, narrated by Miles Miley, with a book length of 10 hours and 9 minutes.
Fred nodded towards some of the nearby guild members who were dragging an entire building's wooden wall towards the outer stone wall. They nodded back with what appeared to be a surprisingly good attitude. Maybe having some sort of plan gave them a sense of purpose. He walked to the exact center of town, with DC keeping pace with his progress. And as he looked at all the activity around him, he couldn't help but think that he wasn't keeping his side of the bargain. He looked down at the dire wolf pup, and she looked back with a look that said, "You know what you need to do." And now that he was out of his room, with his feet flat on the trampled dirt of the town streets, Fred did. Maybe it was because he had been off the ground on the second floor of the DAS building. Or it could have just been his previous state of mind. Either way, whatever was preventing him from understanding how to establish his territory was gone, or at least much diminished.
All right, so this is book 2, and I can already say that without hesitation, this is my favorite Brooks series by far. Not to say that his other books aren't good, that they're not enjoyable. I just think this has got like a great concept. It's brilliantly executed, and it's fun more than anything. Fred is just a big doofus, and everything he does is interesting to me. I think that, there's a lot of things that happen, and Fred just being able to pull out a handful of gold and say, "Hey, so what do we need to do with this?" At whatever point is necessary. It's just fun. The concept of the book is pretty cool. I don't think I covered that in the first novel. I didn't really say what happened, so I'm going to say it here. The sentient dungeons kind of rule over humanity, and they do not brook any uprising against them. So if the dungeons suspect that humans have done something to harm another dungeon, they do their utmost to obliterate any humans in the area, just for the gall of having the audacity to hurt them in some capacity. Now, Fred Winkle Mossering, which you gotta have to laugh how Brooks ever came up with that name. Fred Winkle Mossering is the child of 2 dungeon cores. They're non-aligned factions. I think they're even it's like fire and water, so that they don't exactly even come close to meshing together. It's not like it's a water and a nature core or something. Like this is like, I don't belong with you, you don't belong with me. Romeo and Juliet sort of stuff. Fred kind of has to go out of his zone after his parents are murdered. In book 1, Fred is just kind of getting a feel for who he is and what he can do. Now he knows. Now he knows what he is, and by that I mean he always knew he was a dungeon, or at least he had a dungeon core, or that he was the child of a dungeon or dungeons. But now he kind of knows what he is and how to do things. And he can handle himself fairly well. Thankfully, Fred is pretty tough and can recover from most mortal wounds without even having to have somebody give him a Band-Aid. This Brooks book, this book pretty much picks up where the last left off, and it never looks back. Issa and Fred become closer, and I have to say that the clueless love interest bit should not go on much longer than one more book. I think that as of book 3, Fred and Issa should either get their feelings under control and admit them and work on them, or give it up. I hate to see that sort of thing play out for 6 or 7 novels. I mean, look at the movie Yesterday, just as an example. There's a dude here, and if you haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to spoil anything, but he's had like 20 years to pull a hookup with this chick that loves him. Totally obvious that she's into him from everything that she does, from the way that she goes and does this for him or that for him, and he is completely oblivious. And he's so stupid that after he loses her, he does nothing but mope the rest of the movie about the love that had been in his face the whole time. At that point, if you weren't interested before, why in the hell is it you suddenly become interested after she says, "I'm done waiting"? What is it with that? Either he had this massive crush, but like when she reveals it to him, it is like a stunning revelation. He had no clue. And at no point did he say, "And I felt the same way." No, okay? So I really am hoping that by book 3 or 4, the whole clueless phase will have vanished, and they'll begin building a relationship together. So what happens here, though? What's more importantly, what goes on in this book? Well, finally, Fred gets to make a dungeon. And it's a pretty Pretty cool thing to kind of see as he begins to suss out his real potential. He also comes to realize that making a dungeon may not have been the wisest thing for him to do. It sort of puts a big bullseye on him, and other dungeons kind of target that bullseye. And the other dungeons really want him dead. They basically throw everything they can at him. I mean, I'm talking about cats, kitchen sinks, Godzilla monsters, they toss everything they can at him to wipe him out, and the place where he is living. So, if you think of characters who are just insane, I think that one of my favorite quotes is Greg from The Last Starfighter, where he says, "I've always wanted to fight a desperate battle against impossible odds." And, Alex Rogan's kind of like, "What the frick is wrong with you?" Well, that is not Fred's sentiment, but that's what he has to do. Fred and his people in this town have to fight a desperate battle against incredible odds, impossible odds, unbeatable odds, stacked up unbeatable odds, because the dungeons are coming for him and them. There is no mercy, no quarter, no chance of survival unless Fred can really, really pull something out of his behind. And we all know he's got like a magical butt that he can pull anything out he wants. So, Fred does everything he can to protect his people in numerous ways. And I don't want to get into it, but the book kind of builds up to, Fred kind of finding out who he is, how to work himself, figure out, how to do the dungeon thing. And then it's a really big, long, drawn-out battle. And when I mean drawn out, I mean the battle is lengthy. I don't mean it's like one chapter. I mean it's a good chunk of the book battle, and that's fine. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really clever. Fred does a lot of stuff that you wouldn't expect. Just like, for example, he starts using like tripping vines to stop monsters. They're, way beyond just being tripped and hurt. But I have to say, the battle was hella cool, and we get to see Fred at his finest. And the battle was certainly pitched and desperate, but Fred is a stand-up kind of guy. He doesn't back down. He doesn't give up. Even when things look tough, he, puts his back to the wall, digs in, and goes forward to do everything he can, that he has to. He just has to do that. And that's, like I say, that's one of my favorite things about this book is Fred's character and the other characters are all really interesting people. They're people that if you met them, you'd be like, wow, that was a really cool person to meet and talk to. Miles Miley rocks this town, and I mean he rocks it inside out. I really enjoyed his narration skill here and the way that he is not distracted with the charts or the opposite sex characters. His ladies, granted, may not be Oscar level quality, but he doesn't sound like Mrs. Doubtfire. Oh, it does not sound like that at all. He makes the story fun and brings the characters to life, which is really all you can ask for. This book, from start to finish, I listened to it and I barely put it down. 8.4 stars. Fred's story just becomes more interesting and has real bones. I think that the world building is getting better. I think the stakes are getting higher, and I think the dangers are becoming real and they're looming. And Fred doesn't have a lot of hope, in the future. So, I personally cannot wait to see what happens next. 8.4 stars. You will not go wrong getting this series. Pick this up. It is just an amazing, amazing series. So here we go. This one is Dungeon World 3. The Dungeon Core Experience by Jonathan Brooks, narrated by Miles Miley, with a book length of 10 hours and 44 minutes.
Just as the sun started to touch the distant horizon, Fred woke up Isa and told her to stop the crystal scorpions. She blinked sleepily, but did as he asked. But Regnark wasn't having any of it. "What are you doing? We need to get to the Deadlands as soon as we can. What part of large, fearsome monsters did you not understand?" He practically yelled at Fred. "Quiet down, I understood you fine. The problem, though, is that it's going to take a lot longer than we thought to get to the Deadlands. I need to start preparing if we're going to survive the night," Fred calmly replied, getting off the back of the scorpion and stretching his legs out. He helped Issa down by grabbing her by the waist and lifting her down, and she thanked him for his help. Prepare for what? From what I've heard, there's no preparing against these things. Only some of the highest-rated groups of DAS members have endured a night out here. And not all of them actually survived an encounter with whatever they are. Is suicide to... Don't worry, we're not staying out here. We're staying under there, Fred said, pointing to the ground in front of him.
So Fred Winklemossring is back and better than ever. This time, he and his companions are on the run from the nature dungeons. And I mean, they're hoofing it. They are running for their lives across unknown territories and dangerous lands, trying to escape the best way they know how. And you get a really good feel for this world as they do so. They're looking across the country, looking for the branded and banished people they fought so hard to defend in Book 2. Issa deals with her newly minted status better than expected. And I think it's because her new status is probably better than what she was before. Plus, we get to see a face from the past of one of Fred's first friends. They make a reappearance here. Now, one of the best parts of this book is that we get to see more of Fred's world. We get some perspective on what's going on with the other dungeon, what's happening, and what they're thinking. And we get to see this world as in a kind of a downward spiral that's eventually going to lead to the extinction of humanity or dungeon humanity. Basically, both could also die. So either, humans or dungeons or both can pass away. And yes, I just made up the word dungeon humanity. In my defense, it fits here. Several things to point out. First of all, there's a ton of growth in each of the characters. And I mean that. There's really three big characters in the book. And I don't want to spoil who the third person is, but Issa, Fred, and then the third person who makes a return. They all go through character development and growth that is necessary. So that is really great to see. And I think that Fred really grew in Book 2, and here in Book 3, there's even more of that. Secondly, we get to see some null mana monsters pop up and give it to the adventuring party. I like the idea behind the creation and execution of them in action. They were pretty cool monsters, and, you really kind of got to see just how dangerous the world is outside of where Fred has been so far. Additionally, Issa gets some new powers that lets her kind of rival Fred to a degree. And she comes to admit her feelings for Fred to a certain extent, which was refreshing. Fred struggles to understand his feelings in general. If this was our world, he would be autistic because, he knows he likes people. He just doesn't understand the ins and outs of, getting them to kind of understand him and him understanding them as well as they should each other. Fred just kind of struggles to understand feelings in general. In some ways, he's a much nicer version, if you ask me, of Boxy Morningwood. Boxy is almost identical to him in many ways. They're both very young for what they are. They both are trying to feel their way through, the humanoid or human society. They both are more than what they seem. And the only difference is between, Boxy from Everybody Loves George Chess and Fred is Boxy's a homicidal maniac. And Fred does everything he can to protect the people that he's around. But I mean, otherwise, if you look at their stories, they're pretty close together on the way they do things and how they think, at least. Fred he's just naive and barely has a clue what's going on around him until this novel. This novel, he seems to come into his own here, finally. He's definitively more in control of his abilities and is doing an amazing job getting an understanding of what other cores are, how they work, and how to utilize them. And that's where I say the series is really kind of fascinating. And I put it in the same category as the Divine Dungeon or Slime Dungeon. The 3 books in, and Brooks already has one hell of a series on his hand. And I'm thinking, Divine Dungeon seems to only have so many. The Slime Dungeon only has so many. And I think Brooks has, Core Station has 5 books, I think. And we're at 3 on audio now. and I know he's finished the core station, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how many he has here, but I like that he's got an endpoint in mind. And there is a lot of things happening here, that has really raised the stakes. I mean, the stakes are high. I talked earlier in Dungeon Player about how, or not Dungeon Player, was it? Dungeon Player. There's no tension. There's no threat hanging over the characters. Here, there is a lot of stuff happening. For the characters, there's tension, there's sacrifice, there's dangers. They do have things happen. Yeah, and grant you, yes, if Fred has his head chopped off, he'll regrow a head. So there's not a lot of tension in that kind of aspect. But there's a lot of things that happen that you do have this build up and this tension where like the dungeons are literally hunting Fred and his people. So I just have to say, the stakes are high, and Fred is really dedicated to doing the right thing. And I think he right now he's having a hard time with the dungeons because he's been pretty aggressive with the dungeons, and he's sided himself basically with humanity. But at some point, he's going to have to also say, "I'm dungeon too," and at that point, he's going to have to kind of equalize things out for everybody and make it where it's all fair and fun for both parties. And I have one question I have to ask, and I don't know if Jonathan Brooks will answer this or not, or if he even listens to this sort of thing. But if Fred's parents were both cores, what's the deal with his human body? Why is he a hybrid? How is he a hybrid? Did his folks build the human body for him? Did they just use a corpse that had been laying around? Was there a sacrifice that gave Fred his humanity? By that, I mean, like, did a human guy come up and say, "Look, if you provide this for my family, like unlimited riches for them, I'll give you my body, and your son can have it for his shell," so to speak. I mean, you just have to wonder, because if Fred wasn't housed in a meat shell, he would never be able to do what he plans on doing, ever. And the human body gives him a unique power that no other dungeons have. I would say mobility, but that's not quite it. He has a whole different perspective on what the dungeons are and what people are and how they should interact and do things. And it's just exciting to see how well he works with that human side of himself, even though he's really a dungeon at heart. That's one of the things that I think that it kind of gets glossed over a little bit. Fred has a human body, but he's really, really, really a dungeon down deep. So just something to bear in mind. At the end of the book, we come to a special place where there are rules and regulations for all the dungeons to follow. Their dungeons aren't allowed within a certain radius. They're not allowed to build a dungeon there, and so on and so forth. And of course, if you know Fred, he kind of breaks all the rules and has things happening, but it's a really, really fun way to do it. And I have to say, Brooks just has such a winner here on his hands. This is an intensely great series. I love this series. It is one of my favorite dungeon books of all time, and it just gets better and better. Like, book 1 was great, book 2 was fantastic. This one is amazing, and I can't speak more highly of it than what I do right now. Final score, 8.5 stars. Brooks has built up an interesting cast of characters, flip things around so the cores are not only the dungeon types out there anymore, because there's stuff going on with Issa and some other people in the area of Fred that is completely new and unexpected. The world building that he's doing is incredibly impressive and complex, and it makes me want to see more of what comes next. I think that this is Brooks' best series by far, bar none, no questions about it. I am all in 100% with this series. So, if you really like dungeons, this is a series for you. Get book 1, get book 2, book 3. And like I say, Miles Miley just nails the narration. He gets everything that Brooks lays down. He knows the jokes. He gets the pacing. He has it all in hand. And that's what I say. I just wish he would do all the series, because he is just really great for Brooks's stuff. He just totally gets it. So 8.5 stars. This one I'm going to do is Dungeon Player, a LitRPG dungeon core adventure. Glendaria Awakens Trilogy. This is book 1. Again, like I say, by Jonathan Brooks, narrated by Sarah L. Colton, with a book length of 3 hours and 48 minutes.
Which race are you going to choose? Devin asked. Come on. You know we've been over and over what we're going to select for months now. Krista whined. Ever since launch, you've spent hours and hours poring over the forums, looking at the pros and cons of each race, class, and profession. Although I have to admit that I spent most of those hours with him poring over the same information. I'm pretty sure we decided last week what we should do when we'd finally get the chance to play. Sorry, it's just that the time has finally come, and I'm forgetful and nervous and excited and forgetful and... You're silly, she laughed before asking, anyways, how do we get started? It's funny, I read all about the game, but I didn't pay attention to how these pods work.
So, I do believe that this was Brooks' first novel. I mean, you can really kind of get a feel for that fact as he does things here that he doesn't do in later books. The novel is fairly short, and I can appreciate the short story aspect. I'm always looking for new short stories. I have no issue with the length of the book. I don't know if I was buying the novel, because I don't know what the cost of the book is, but I mean, that might be a factor if I was literally buying the Kindle edition, where I would say, okay, it's only like 190 pages. Is it worth $6? I don't know what it sells for. I have to even wonder that for novelized, but for here, it's a pretty good price. I think it's a good deal, and I think that even though it's the first book, it's a good stepping stone into insight on how he has built up his world, because he has some amazing series out there. That said, I think the book, for its length, is really stat heavy. It was like I was always just getting into the flow of the book when we get into like a ton of these numbers. And I have to say, I know that like Brooks pretty much comes out and says at the beginning of any of his books, I like to share information. I like to give as much information as I can to the listener. And I like to keep things crunchy, and that's fantastic. I appreciate that because there's nothing I hate more than having things withheld or being obscured for no real reason. So I'm very appreciative that he's eager to share his information on like how the world works, and that there's nothing kept from the reader or listener. More importantly, he brings, and here's what I'm going to say this: as much as there's a bit of a flow issue, he brings some really cool new ideas to the genre. Here, his MCs are fun and interesting, but I did have a few issues. Like first, the new author vibe kind of kicks in where there seems to be no real stakes or tensions for the character. Literally, there's nothing that happens where I say, oh my God, something horrible is going to occur. One of them is going to be obliterated or something like that. That never really comes up. There's no penalties, no losses, no consequences. The MCs, Devin and Krista, have to endure the game, the game world, and they never have anything happen. For example, in most books, if the MC dies, there's XP loss, and I'll be honest, just as an example in my own personal life about experience points loss, I hate XP loss from death in video games. I hate it. I can remember playing EverQuest. So when it first came out, I played EverQuest. And I always play solo because I hate teaming up with other people. I'm not a cooperative player. I'm not a team player. I'm a solo guy. 90% of the time, if I play by myself. There was a few times I tried to play WoW with my wife. But we just did not. Like, my wife is an extreme healer. That's what she does. She's a massive healer. She's been in massive guilds that have praised her and said how great a healer she is. She knows what she's doing. She is a cooperative and impressive individual for those sort of things. Me, I solo everything. Does that mean that I do great? Nope. Do I usually break past level 25 in a video game? No, I really don't. Because those games are made to be cooperative. You're made to go out and get gear and do raids. I don't do that because why? it involves other human beings and playing with them. And I don't like to do that. I like to just do things on my own. City of Heroes, that was one of those ones where I played ridiculous amounts of time all by myself. And I think I probably teamed up 2 or 3 times just because I had nothing better to do at the time. And I thought, okay, hell, I'll do this. But in EverQuest, see, I digress. As Lil Jackson likes to put it, I digress. Well, he doesn't say I digress. I say I digress. But anyway, I digress. EverQuest, I can remember I got into an area, and I was playing a druid, and I built him up to like level 17. And the area I got to, there was just this one, it was a giant, I do believe. There was a tower, and I was trying to get to the tower to hide until he finally had the aggro wear off, and he could go away. And I can remember sitting there getting drunk because I was just trying to pass time. And after I thought he was gone, I came outside. I was sober at that point, and I still got clobbered. I got pounded, and every time I tried to go back to get gear or finish up, I would get killed over and over and over again until I finally escaped with my stuff. And I was level 12 by that point. And at that point, I just said it was hard to regrind those levels. And it just pissed me off something so fierce that I just said, hell with it, I'm done with the game. I literally logged in like the next day and was like, anybody want any of this gear for like you newbie druids, let me know. I've got stuff for you. And I gave away everything that wasn't like bound to my character. My money, my gold, my magic, whatever it was, I gave it away and I walked away. I quit. So I get that if I'm writing a book, I might take into consideration and make it where if somebody dies, they don't have XP loss or something, but there's no tension in this book to kind of make you really go, oh, I can't believe that this happened. What are they going to do? And at least not until the very, very, very end of the novel. So it's kind of like it's interesting, but this is kind of, there's a loss here somewhere. One thing I was kind of surprised to see was, and I really enjoyed this aspect, was, the characters have the ability to shift anything they want to about themselves, if they got killed. So, you don't like being an elf, swap over to being human. Easy breezy, lemon squeezy, tired of being a cleric and having to pray all day, pick up a knife and stand in the shadows, now you're a rogue. That was pretty cool. My big problem was Colton's narration is sort of middle of the road. She tries doing voices, but her male voices are weak like olive oil from Popeye weak. I mean, just, there's no muscle there at all. There's nothing. After listening to Colton and Coxie, and I'll tell you about Coxie later, I've just come to the conclusion that Brooks is better served keeping Miley on as his signature narrator. And I'll talk about Miles here on a couple other books. I think Miles just does a fantastic job, but Colton and Coxie, they are not inspiring me to go back, and I'm kind of shocked because I think Colton also does the Core of Horror book. And I've been dying to get that book and listen to it. And if she is the narrator, it's going to be hard for me. I'm really hoping she brings her A game because she kind of just drew this book down more than it should have. It was not as fun as it could have been with her there. And again, books are made or broken by their narrators. And she broke this one pretty good. It was just kind of middle of the road stuff. And I think the story was better than the narration. And that caused issues because if you have a story that's better than the narration, you have a mediocre story. There's nothing about it. But this was a good starting point for Brooks. This is where he made his mark on the dungeon genre. And I think that it was actually, even though it was his first book, it wasn't his first release. I think he did Station Court first. And if I'm wrong on that, Jonathan, you can correct me, but this was definitely his first written novel. I think he went back and released it afterwards just to say, hey, look, here's one of the novels I did. I hope you guys like it. Which I think that if I was just reading the book, I would probably enjoy it much more than when I did listening to it. So for me, this is probably his weakest novel in all the books he's done so far in terms of plot progression and character adversity. There's a lot of setup here, a lot of stats. So I can see this becoming a decent series in the future. I just hope he I just talked about like how loyal the audiobook listeners are to their narrators, but they have to be good, great, fantastic, amazing, blow your mind kind of narrators, because sometimes switching over is a step up. And Miles Miley, I think, would probably do a lot better just carrying all your books, Jonathan. So for me, this is like a final score of 7.7. Like I say, it's the weakest of the books because it's a lot of flow issues with the stats and the story and the narration. So as interesting as it was, and there were some really cool concepts, I have to say it was a good try, and I still think it was a good book. And it's probably a better book than it is an audiobook. Okay, so 7.7 stars. Okay, so the next book I'm going is Crafter's Dungeon, a dungeon core novel of dungeon crafting by Jonathan Brooks, narrated by Louise Coatsey. This is a book length of 9 hours and 59 minutes.
Every one of their transport vehicles had more than adequate supplies to help with any type of accident. There was even an ultra-expensive, high-quality health potion in each box, which would heal and fix almost any non-fatal injury. Her father's paranoia about wounds did come in handy sometimes. Though handy wasn't quite the word either of them would normally use. Born with a defect in both of her hands that made them practically deformed, Sandra had difficulty gripping, squeezing, and holding anything heavier than the knife she had fumbled earlier, and moving her fingers in any complicated motions was next to impossible. In fact, they were shaped more like monster claws than normal hands and had an almost permanent curl to them. However, after 26 years of living with it, she could manage most common things with a little effort. After spreading a little low-grade healing ointment on her scrape from an easy-to-open jar, she wound a small, clean bandage around it and secured it into place with a simple tie.
So I think it's fair by this point that I can say I'm a Brooks fan. There's no doubt about it. I'm probably doing these in weird orders or something like this, just to kind of keep things mixed up. But I'm just going to come out and say Miles Miley should do all his books, okay? I've said this in other reviews, and I'm sticking by this. Miles Miley gets the humor and pacing that Brooks lays out. He does a decent job on the voicings of the opposite sex. Coatsey, however, cannot touch him. At best, she does a serviceable job, and at worst, a barely passable one. There were numerous points where I found her to just not be monotone, but almost droning. And I especially hated that when it came to doing the stats, because it was kind of like listening to, Ferris Bueller's teacher, Bueller, anyone. It wasn't fun. It was a tedious process sometimes. She forced me to literally put the book down multiple times, or just go do something else for a little while. It made it difficult for me to get into the flow of the story, and I constantly found myself wishing that Miles had been handed the reins. So she's kind of like, Brooks is a drag racer. She is a parachute that blows too soon. I mean, he's already trying to build up speed, and she's already full-blown blown out and holding back. I'm trying not to be mean about it, but I'm going to be honest. It was a chore to get through her narration, much more so than the book, The Dungeon Player, because at least there, Colton tried really hard and did do some things. But here it's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. She just did not grip me with the story. I don't know if she didn't understand the story or if the stats were just like a chore for her to do. But it sure felt like a chore to me. And that is where you kind of lose yourself. But again, I'm going to say this. I really think Brooks knows the dungeon genre really well. Clearly, this man is a fan of the dungeon books. He is familiar with every aspect of the genre, and he is coming up with new and innovative ways to elevate the genre to bigger things. It's not just Jeffrey Falcon Logue, and it's not just Dakota Kraut having these books out here. There are other people that have written dungeon books, but if you look at it, Brooks has blown the lid off in terms of cranking out these books quickly. And the story here itself is pretty interesting. The MC dies and wakes up as a dungeon core, which is a standard MO for dungeon books. But where the story deviates in a good way is that the dungeon's purpose is what is the dungeon's purpose, and how it goes about taking care of business. Now, two things to pick at, which is what I kind of do. The book is a little slow to start, although my perception of that may be due to Cooksey's narration. It just seemed like it took some time to get started. And again, I can say that with me having to, I started, I stopped, I started, I stopped, I started, I stopped. That could have been just because of her narration, but I think that it was a little slow story-wise. But once it got going, it wasn't bad. But there's not a lot of interaction as the story deals with really the dungeon and a dork. The MC Sandra has a pretty cool background, and she has an artistic spirit. She wants to create things, when she was alive, but she had janky hands and couldn't, and now she has an opportunity to create anything she wants. Like she's always had this dream to do. Her dungeon was pretty much created to balance out the other types of dungeons, which are basically just homicidal monsters that make Godzilla look like a toddler throwing a tantrum. The crafting and the progression are fun, and her experience, but the I don't want to murder all the people of the dungeon, it also made it different, but a little weird. The dungeon's got to eat, and there has to be some sort of, I think I can get away with a couple of these guys here or there. The one thing that really threw me off, though, of everything, was that as much as Sandra wants to create and do neat new things, I think that one of the bad parts is if I'm remembering correctly, she could not create monsters on her own. They were already like prefab monsters. And as somebody who wants to craft and do things, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was kind of weird that she wouldn't have the opportunity to create new life forms, like just say, for example, Cal does in the Divine Dungeon. You take a bunny, you take, a snake, and you mash them up and you come out with a bake, a buck. I don't know. Anyway, the buke. He had no problem doing that sort of stuff, and she doesn't get to do it, and it was just kind of weird. The book is, as usual for Brooks, full of lovely, crunchy stats and progression, and he fills this book with tons of info. The book, for the most part, is mostly set up for the rest of the series, or at least so it seems to me. I think that this is like one of these books where you say, okay, I have a lot that I want to do, but I have to give you this. I'm going to call it an info dump, but I have to give you all this information so that it all makes sense later on. And that kind of has that feel. The minutia that is here is essentially framework laid for a larger story coming down the line. And again, the reason I feel like this is that for the majority of books, there's not a lot of dialogue. And I think we get to well after the halfway point, maybe even further than that, before the dungeon really starts having guests and talking occurs and things like that. I think you have to have something there in order to, bounce, even if she had talked to herself, it may not have been as bad. But you go a long way before there's even dialogue. So, it was all set up and built up for what was to come later. And part of it was paid off at the end of the book, but I think it's going to go further into the next issue, next novel. So I think that Brooks kind of has this all done at this point. Now he can focus on the story, and that'll be nice. I would love to see that. But again, if Coatsy is reading it, I don't know if I will. Excuse me. I know that I enjoyed this story. I thought it was really neat. But the narration by Coatsy just kind of just stuck me really the wrong way. I had to keep stopping and going. Anyway, pacifistic dungeon core is a pretty new concept, and the struggle to make traps that don't kill is pretty novel. It's pretty cool. So there's a lot of stuff happening here, and I think Brooks has a good, solid foundation for a View Askew type of series. And now that that's all laid out, I can't wait to see what happens next. Again, unless if he can get someone else to do this. One last thing is not to be the dead horse, but I've talked about the differences between sentient and sapient before. So he may want to go back and look that up because that is one of my sticking points. Is sentient is not the word you mean to use. Sapient is. So maybe just look that up a little bit because that's one of my crazy points. That and ensigns. Anyway, good start to a promising series that gets weighted down by minimalistic narration. Here, my final score is going to be 7.7 stars. And I know this, oddly enough, is probably one of his more popular novels. I know everybody that I've talked to about this novel has said they really loved it. It was a great read. They enjoyed it. And therein lies the rub. That's why I do this show and Ramon does the other one, because Ramon is doing the reading and I'm doing the listening. And sometimes the two do not meet, even though they should. There should never be a point where he says this book was a 5 and I say it was a 10, and I should never say this book was a 10 and he says it was a 5. We'll have differences on like how high we go with something, but a good book is a good book is a good book. And I know, and 7.7 is not bad by any stretch, but it was probably way better. Would have had a way better score, but the narration just kind of killed it for me. It bogged it down. It just bogged this story down so much. So I apologize. And I mean, no disrespect to Coxie. I just don't think that this is her bag, so to speak. And I don't know where she fits in narration-wise, but this is not it. She just did not work well for me here. I'm sorry. But there you go. 7.7 stars. Okay. So the next book I'm going is not by Jonathan Ross. It is Dungeon Traveler by Alston Sleet, narrated by Doug Teasdale Jr., with a book length of 9 hours and 17 minutes.
Death is unpleasant. That's probably no surprise to anyone. After all, not many people want to be dead. When I say that death is unpleasant, I don't mean the process of becoming dead. No, I mean being dead. Not that the process was much better. It was relatively quick for me, but it still wasn't a slice of cake. It actually involved cake, since the truck was a bakery delivery truck rushing to a wedding, but I never got a slice, and what I ate was more asphalt and sidewalk than delightful icing. I can't even claim some kind of noble act of bravery, rushing forward to save some child's life. No, I was playing on my phone while walking home from the pub after a few too many drinks over the weekend. A midday drinking binge, an untucked shirt covering my belly, lapping over my too-tight belt, hair disarrayed since I didn't have a wife or other to direct me to get it cut, a quick squint at the screen while walking through the crosswalk, and splat.
In a genre that seems to be inundated with numerous books that simply repeat the cycle of become a dungeon, bring in adventurers, kill them, and repeat, it becomes harder and harder to stand out. Dungeon Traveler manages to stand out in an excellent way, in a clever way, and in a smooth way. Instead of just being a dungeon, it is not located in one place. It travels instead. This is, of course, why it's called Dungeon Traveler, although I would think from the context of the name of the novel, you would think the Dungeon Traveler was about somebody who went from dungeon to dungeon, not the dungeon going to other places. And that is where all the fun kind of kicks in. The dungeon pops in place into existence for a little unspecified amount of time, and then moves on. Basically, it goes from race to race, rather than just place to place. The dungeon learns from each encounter, and it is very fair in dealing with its guests. It's not just a homicidal murder machine. It does kill people, but it does it at their own stupidity. And if they do it They deserve it. The setup is pretty typical. A guy from our world dies. Sound familiar? And he wakes up in a strange place. Sounds familiar. But this time he's a core. He's already there. He doesn't have an idea of what happened, how he got to be the way he is. All he knows is that he's kind of stuck in this one room. He doesn't have much time because the people who made him have some nefarious purposes in mind for him. So he manages to pull an escape and then takes his time to catch his breath and learn exactly what he is and what he's meant to do. And here I'm going to say the MC is actually very fun. I really love this book a lot. I think it has some genuine moments to it, very deep moments, and it does its best to detail what it is each race is like as they enter the dungeon. So, there are unique ways of dealing with the dungeon come across, their reactions come across, and so on and so forth. When I think out of all of them, the Keebles are my favorite. I just totally love them with pieces, the way that they did things. The entire premise is unique. It makes this a chunk of gold amongst iron pyrite. There is an overarching plot that kind of deals with gods and politics and other such things. But for me, just getting to see the way the dungeon reacts to each encounter was fun. Remember, this isn't his world, and so he's learning about it at the same rate we are. We're kind of in this together, the dungeon, you and I. Also, there's a lot of stuff here to keep the crunchers happy. As the MC kind of advances with notifications and pop-ups throughout, personally, I love to hear the non-Euclidean geometries being used, as it kind of harkens back to my extreme love of all things H.P. Lovecraft. Now, Doug Teasdale Jr. does, he does a really good job. He's very familiar with LitRPG and dungeons, having worked with people like Eric Oster and Skylar Grant on more than just a few of his books. So, he knows the genre really well. If you really like his work, if you really like Doug Teasdale Jr., what I will suggest is that you try a book called Orconomics. It is funny as hell, and he really shines in this novel. In Traveler, Teasdale is in top form, and he plays every role with great aplomb. He just has fun here, and that's what the story dictates. He should just have fun. For example, there's a scene where Cautious Keebold literally licks the floor, and the core is stunned and amused and curious all at the same time. And Teasdale manages to sound that way all at once. I think the only hurdle that I heard him catch himself on, and I have to call him out, is that the world's system is described as having a matronly or a motherly voice, and he does not go near it with that kind of a voice. A motherly voice or a matronly voice is very comforting, very concerned, very, very helpful. So when the system pops up, it should be like, I'd just like to help out. How can I do this? How can I make you feel better? What can I do for you? And you don't have that. But, I will say, honestly, I don't know if he just didn't feel like he couldn't pull that off, if he didn't have that in him, so he stayed away from it, or if he just didn't notice it, and he just skipped that part as he was going through. So whether he thought he couldn't pull it off or he missed the aspect, I don't know. But at least he didn't try to make a Southerner sound British, like I've heard other narrators do, limitlessly, as I keep thinking about, with that. Anyway, the series is a unique take. It's got a lot of great characterization. The book is, how do I put this? It's not super long. It's 9 hours. So, you can sit through it in one listening if you really want to. It's enjoyable. I really recommend this book. I'm going to say 8.3 stars. It's a good first book. It's a promising series. I just can't wait to see what happens next. And I think you will too. I think that this has been a really good, fun novel, and it stands alone just in the fact that it does something unique. And again, that's the whole key now that we have. This is what the genre consists of, and this is what we all do, and now we can't do any of those things. We have to be be smarter and better and take care of things. And Brooks, himself, when he's doing his books, he does that too. He does a lot of unique things, that you don't see coming, like Fred Winklemossering being a dungeon that walks around. That's unique. Here, the dungeon doesn't walk around. It just kind of says, whoop, and reappears somewhere else. And that works. It works really, really well. So with that being said, I think that, 8.3 stars, I just really want to get the next book and see how it goes. Sleet really does work well with this. So 8.3 stars. All right, so next up is Station Core, a Dungeon Core epic by Jonathan Brooks. Yet again, narrated by Miles Miley, and a book length of 9 hours and 38 minutes.
He had become adept at battlefield logistics in his previous incarnation as a top-tier gamer, but he never had to worry about finding where the food came from. As long as he had the requisite gold or resources, he'd be able to buy enough to outfit his units. The town-building games he had played in the past allowed the creation of sources of food, but it was more of a point-and-click construction, and then it would be up and running after a short period of time. He was going to have to learn more about sustaining his combat units in the future so that they wouldn't drop dead of starvation when he needed them the most. Despite the starvation and near starvation of his snakes, as well as the well-fed jackalopes, his frontline defenders did an excellent job of protecting the entrance tunnel. In fact, the only thing that got past them was a small dog-like animal which was about the size of a dachshund, but with the quickness of a greyhound. Speeding past their swift strikes without harm, he was going to call it a grey wiener, a combination of a greyhound and a dachshund or wiener dog.
So Brooks kind of popped up with the release of this book. And I mean, he kind of just said, here I am. And I took notice right away. It sounded like it was a really good story. And I find it funny how many people thought that he had like this giant squirrel in the story based on the cover. I can remember when the cover first popped up, people were like, he's got a giant squirrel. And that's not the case at all. I also get the joke about the bloodthirsty squirrels. Totally. I totally get it, Jonathan. I don't know if you really have lived this out or not, but I have lived the tale of being attacked by a squirrel. I mean, way back in college, I was feeding the squirrel peanuts, and when I ran out, the little monster ravaged my hand, giving me a lifelong vendetta against those furry little buggers. So I totally get where Milton comes from on that topic, because they are vicious, they are rodents, and they will eat anything, including you in your hand if you don't have peanuts. And I want to make sure I said peanuts, and you understood that I was talking about peanuts, and that's what I was giving this squirrel. Because. So here again, here's where we have a guy, and this is like one of the typical tropes. He gets snatched and taken to a strange area, only to find out he has been volunteered to become a station core, and in order to help a race that is kind of hyper advanced but has no aggressive instincts whatsoever. He wakes up only to find himself severely damaged and on a strange world 4 millennia in the future. For him, there is no going back. Quite simply, that's it. He's got no body, he's got no family, he's got nobody at all. There's nothing he can do except survive and hopefully escape this planet. Thankfully, he has a cutie patootie mass of nanites who kind of help him as he kind of figures out how to survive in a hostile world. Milton he's an interesting dude, okay? Who seems to kind of settle into being a core pretty quickly and easily. And I do have a few nits to pick, but they're not that big a deal. First, Milton's companion is from the collective, and she swears all the time, like a sailor who's on leave who finds himself in a $2 whorehouse with 50 cents to his name. That kind of swearing mad. Okay, personally, I don't care. I mean, I'm a person who loves to string along a massive web of obscenities and just shatter swear jars with a look. Because I love to swear, I love to cuss, I love to curse. Those are things in life that make me happy. So I will just walk around and just, when there's no one nearby, I let them fly, just because I like the way they sound. I almost could be considered to have Tourette's, okay? But not quite there yet. Anyway, it would have been a great book for my kids, except for the swearing. Now, again, I don't mind the swearing for kids. Kids hear it, they hear it in school, they say it in school. I'm not overwhelmed by the swearing aspects, but my wife does care. She does mind, and so they missed out on a really good book. Secondly, one thing I'm going to say is Milton was chosen for his gaming skills, and yet he has trouble conceptualizing just simple traps. He struggles to have ideas to come up with some really good ones. I mean, eventually he does come up with some really cool ideas, but it's not just the traps. I mean, there's a couple of things I'm like, he could figure out how to keep invaders out of his I don't want to call it a dungeon, but, his dungeon. Either he's not as good as Collective thought he was, or he suffered some serious brain damage in the transfer, because I'm not amazed by his gaming powers being applied here on this world. There's things he does that are pretty smart, but again, it has nothing to do with his gaming techniques. Otherwise, the progression of him dealing with the intrusions works out pretty well. I especially like the way that Brooks holds off on just letting Milton kind of combine creatures together for some cool hybrids, and then he is size limited on what he can make. So, if it was me, I would just lose my mind and be like, okay, he's got a DNA recombiner, he's going to do this, and this, and he's going to take this and make these monsters, and he doesn't do it because he can't just make giant monsters or human-sized monsters willy-nilly, because he has to have specific things that aren't built yet. The other thing is we also get to see that Milton's presence, whether he wants it to or not, has had a massive impact on the environment in some seriously major ways, especially with the locals. The locals, the natives, the Aboriginal people, whatever you want to call them there, they kind of have stuff happen to them just because Milton exists. And the locals are interesting. And like I say, Milton's impact on the environment is massive. We only get to see a small portion of the world that Milton finds himself in and maintains, but it keeps your interest and sets up a bigger story for the future. So here, what is the book about? The book is about this guy, Milton, trying to figure out where he's at, what's going on, how he can repair himself and get the hell off the planet before he's destroyed. And then he can go out and look to see what happened to the collective. Now, obviously this is book one, and it's not leaping ahead in massive, jump in time. Even though he does sleep a little bit here or there, I never once felt like if he slept for 100 years that we missed out on something, because even though it comes back and says, well, I defended my lair about 12 times, so I got like 12 points of experience, so, I leveled up a little bit here or there. It doesn't feel like I've been robbed, and usually that is the case. Usually I say, I've been robbed, I've been missing something, there's more to the story, and it was taken away from me just so they could jump through time. Here, I didn't feel like that at all. I didn't need to see him killing snakes, the lollipop snakes or something. And that's one of the other things I get. Like, Brooks has this good sense of humor. Where, the Milton kind of just names things as he sees them. So the snake that I'm talking about, it looks like a lollipop because it's got a great big head and it's got a thin body. It's a lollipop. They become lollipop snakes. He gives those things their names. And that's throughout the whole book, like quick lizards or Quizards, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff that I think it really sells really well. And it's just enjoyable. He does get to meet a native named Brent, and they kind of coordinate things together. It's a good story. Miles Miley does an outstanding job here, and I wish that Brooks used him on all of his books. And I probably said that 3 or 4 times by this point. You probably heard me say that. But Miles just really goes well with the writing and gets where Brooks is going. He is humorous and serious depending on what's called for, and he sells the tale. That's the most important thing. He sells it. You don't walk away thinking he didn't care or that he's just punching in and punching out. He cares about the world. He cares about the characters. And he fits the LitRPG style very nicely. So I give him a ton of credit. Miley he's worth it. And I wish that, like I say, Brooks would just employ him to get his books done, because everything he does is fun and exciting in my eyes. The final score is going to be 8.3 stars. This begins to build up some steam and is chugging along beautifully. I really do want to know where Brooks gets his ideas, because he's quickly claiming a big stake in the lit RPG genre. The man is a powerhouse for these dungeon novels. And it kind of scares me. I look at what else he can do. Because if he's this good with the dungeon stuff, if he does, like, a Portal World, like say Delvers, or he tries to do like a full immersion game, like Radiant Gate, he's gonna just own the entire genre, because the man does do some really good writing, and I think like between this series, the Station Core, and the Dungeon World, it just works. It just works so well. So I think he's found his pace finally. And again, I haven't read the Core 4, and I haven't read, I've read the other, like the Dungeon Player and other stuff. But the Crafter's Dungeon, it just did not work as well for me as these two books. Like the Station Core and Dungeon World are just fantastically phenomenal. And I think Crafter's Dungeon would probably be really great, but I just can't get into the narration, so I don't know. But I think that Brooks is a major player. I think that he does not get the credit he deserves. I think that he is a standout in this genre, and he is really, really taking the field by force. He is William Wallace, running across the field, cutting off legs and arms, and owning that field. Because he is fearless, and he's doing a great job with these books. So I really do enjoy the Station Core, and I enjoy the Dungeon World more than anything else he's done so far. And again, I've enjoyed his other books too. So final score is 8.3. So, again, here we go, Jonathan Brooks. The Quizard Mountains by Jonathan Brooks. Narrated by Miles Miley, with the book length of 10 hours and 2 minutes.
Fortunately, the four intruders were still hours away from finding his dungeon. That gave Milton time to panic, have a temporary mental breakdown, and then pull himself together as he assessed the current state of the dungeon. While he had been farming, Wisp and Brent had been hard at work building the first room near the entrance, just past the doorway containing the Monomel wire grid trap. After Milton had told her that his drones could understand and follow blueprints, she made them as detailed as possible so that Brent wouldn't have to relay every piece of it. All it took was Brent staring at it while concentrating on delivering orders to the dozen drones still available to them. Within a couple of seconds, they had the plan and were ready to go. Since Milton had a reasonably good tactical map of the underground area around his core, due to searching for ore deposits, Wisp was able to sketch out a bare-bones representation of the final configuration of rooms according to the available space. It followed the general path of his original tunnel, but it expanded it significantly as well.
So, Milton and Company return with a new addition to their exclusive club. Wisp, who is Brent's love interest from book 1, manages to make her way to Milton's home. And I love that Brooks managed to slip the word Wisp into a sci-fi Dungeon Core novel, just because, Will-O-the-Wisp and Divine Dungeon, I think it was really, really slick and smooth, and I give him a lot of credit for that. And I really love that kind of stuff. It's just like one of those little snippets. It's a little Easter egg. It's just a little amuse-bouche to make this much better. And I give him credit because it's just fun for me to see that sort of stuff. Now this time, the gang is trying to endure forays from the Cord Power Company, the makers of those power potions that everybody loves to drink, back in the natives' place, as they seek out the people who are responsible for brewing the better batch of potion that they can ever hope to make. Who just happens to be those people? Why, Brent and Wisp and Milton, and you get it? They're taking his old skunk water and drinking that stuff because it's super juiced up. And so they're kind of not happy, and they're looking for the source as well as a couple other things I don't want to give away. This time around, Milton is making the hybrid monsters, cloning, and learning powers from the natives, because they have this superpower ability too, due to him, and I'm not spoiling anything that's covered in book 1. As he continues to search for rare metal. So, Milton is doing a lot of stuff. At the same time, he's also mining. And it's kind of reminiscent of like Cal from Divine Dungeon, where he'll have this going on, but at the same time, he'll be paying attention over here, building elementals, or, making a wolf man or something like that. So he can do multiple tasks at once. He multitasks. And it just kind of works really, really well. So I really think that, the story starts to feel like a dungeon core more than anything else at this point, because he begins to improve his lair with things like special materials, like Waytium, which is like a super dense type of stone, new monsters, new drones. He's beginning to kind of come into his own as a dungeon or a station core. And I think it is smooth and fun the way he does this. The story is well paced. It unfolds in unexpected ways. Brent and Wisp work well together and actually grow now that they are removed from their societal constraints. The Neonite Cloud Collective helper, I can't think of her name off the top of my head, and I'm sorry about that. She begins to show signs of having like a dissociative identity disorder. I don't know how to put it in a way. As she sort of cycles through various bits of personality, now that she's coming into contact or encountering females from whom she can model herself. So there's Wisp, and then there's a couple of adventurers that came in, so on and so forth, that she kind of gets to say, oh, I like that aspect of them. I think I'll emulate that. So she goes from being the foul-mouthed, all the time kind of person to having other things happening, it was fun. Seeing her kind of go through this up and down as to where she's at the moment kind of personality. We also get to have two of the toughest protectors pop in to kind of see what's going on with Milton. There's a lot of stuff here in the story. Are the protectors agents of the core power company, or are they acting on their own, or is there something more going on? Best of all, Brent kind of manages to discover a huge threat, not only to Milton, but also the entire native populace. Everything seems kind of go to hell at once here as well, which, as you know, is all the fun. That's where all the fun is. That's the meat of the story, is when everything kind of rocks the world. This book, I think I said like a dungeon player, there's no tension. This has tension. This has conflict. It's got struggles. It's got humanity to it. There's a lot happening here. This is, again, a favorite series of mine. I think that Dungeon World and Station Core, hand in hand, hands down, these are the best books that Brooks has produced. I'll try saying that 6 times real fast. Anyway, the Dungeon Core novels, that he does are just incredible. The Station Core, it has a whole other flavor to itself because it is a sci-fi feel, and I enjoy that too. It's a different mode of play. It's a different mode of fighting. It's a different mode of thinking. Even though it's Dungeon Core, there's different aspects that we have to focus on. So, I enjoy sci-fi as much as I do fantasy, and most times it's books like this are fantasy novels. So it's a good change. And Dungeon World is just right here and right beside the Station Core for me. And again, I'll say it, Brooks is becoming a major player in this LitRPG community. Here's what I'll say this. Miley, he makes this a fun romp, and I will reiterate that he does a fantastic job. He knows how to play out the jokes and hit the punchlines where to make you feel the terror that Brent or Milton feel, and he manages to make you hate the Cord Power people with just several snide comments. Now, of course, he might not have written those snide comments, but he sure as hell snided them up just the right way. He really does get Brooks's concepts as they are hitting the page, and he can reproduce those vocally, which is a rare thing in most narrators, especially with Brooks, because Brooks narrators are either 100% hit or it's 100% miss. And so far, if it's been Miles Miley, it is a centerpiece shot for the dartboard. If it's not been Miles Miley, it has been anywhere and everywhere around that dartboard, except on the dartboard itself. The cast is slowly growing, but it's keeping pace with the rising dangers. Milton continues to learn from his mistakes and manage to make some progress in his self-repairs, and it seems like everyone has some character growth while the greater danger slowly amps up. This is an excellent series that has strong legs, and it's really going to go the distance in becoming a brilliant addition to the Dungeon Core genre. Final score, 8.4 stars. I particularly like the science aspect of this dungeon. It sets it apart from most others. Like Dungeon World, this world is gradually being unveiled to contain more mysteries and spins than you would imagine. Honestly, just when you think you've had things figured out, you're totally wrong. Totally wrong. So 8.4 stars, I really recommend this book. Now, it is time for our sound booth spotlight. Today, I feature Dungeon Lord Abdominal Creatures. Abdominal? Like the Abdominal Snowman? No, it's Dungeon Lord Abominable Creatures. Wraiths Haunt Book 3 by Hugo Huesca. Narrated by Jeff Hayes and the ever-lovely Annie Ellicott, with a book length of 19 hours and 43 minutes.
Finally! Dungeon Lord Edward Wright, Master of the Haunt.
Ah, welcome, Lord Wraith.
The Haunt's expenses are hugely demanding.
What kind of dungeon lord are you? Are you a foot soldier or a general, my lord?
Dungeon Lords are magical up to their balls, Kess. Us normals can't compare.
Before it befits a dungeon lord of my status.
Are you brave enough to do the honors, Dungeon Lord? Or shall you keep relying on your minions?
So, this is one of those quest things that has everyone so excited.
I bet it won't be the same unless it's a Dungeon Lord's quest.
Most dungeon lords use their minions that way. Most dungeon lords are now dead.
Don't pretend like you didn't miss me.
I really have to say I was very, very pleased with how this book turned out. I honestly hadn't expected it to kind of amp up in the third book. I thought books 1 and 2 were really good, but it just kind of really inflates, where the story's going. Lord Wraith is just as brilliant and conniving as before, but now he has some experience under his belt, and he's really kind of getting used to what it takes to be a dungeon lord. He's not, iffy or anything. He's really going out there. He's trying his best. He's working really hard to improve himself. He's doing whatever he can for the forces of darkness to be repelled. No matter what they throw at him, he's going to knock it away, or at least so he thinks. Edward has a lot happening here, and I mean a lot. He's got a de-aged vampire he's kind of added into his clan, and we get a really big monster battle. And I applaud Edward for sticking to his no-kill rule. And I know some people might go, this guy's a little crazy, but I understand it completely because he realizes that a single misstep, that slippery slope, is going to be something he cannot return from. He does one thing wrong, and he is down the path of darkness, and he will not be able to return. He won't be able to flip back to being a good guy again. You can talk about there's no kill rules and stuff like that, and occasionally the good cop will shoot a bad guy because they know that they're going to get away with it and stuff like that. Edward can't do any of that. He is tethered to doing the right thing at all times, and it's got to be really, really hard because if not, he's going down that dark intent road. And he won't have a flashlight. He won't have a torch. He won't have anything except himself. And he will not know how to get back. There's no way back from that. So it's a good little thing to see him struggle with. And he does not want to become one of Charon's, buddies or minions of the darkness. So watching him kind of struggle to rein in his own minions, because he does have issues with his own minions, particularly the new additions, to keep them from killing at times. It's kind of giggle-inspiring and simultaneously tension-building because nothing good is going to come of it. Even if it doesn't happen right now, there's going to be something that happens in the future, like in book 4, that's just going to blow all out of proportion because he couldn't get a rein on his people. And what I really liked was how Ed was acting like he was playing like three-dimensional chess with everything. He goes on a quest to find out how the heroes operate in the world, and once he manages to do that, he tries to suss out a way to stop them, if he can figure out the first half. So, he's got that going on. He's got the forces of good and light coming at him. So he doesn't have a lot on his plate at all. It's pretty much clear. He doesn't have a lot to do in the whole book. No, I'm kidding. Very clearly, he is inundated with troubles from start to finish. And that's one of the great things about this kind of genre, is that, you can throw a lot at your characters and see how well they react. And Ed's reactions are really, really spot on how he should do it. I mean, like you say, if he takes one wrong step, he's done. He's like walking on real thin glass over an abyss. And, the glass is just starting to crack. And it's fascinating to watch how he handles everything and juggles so many things. And sometimes things slip through. I don't want to give away a lot, but, sometimes things slip through. So on top of all that, he's got to figure out how he can rescue this ancient vampire, coordinate and train his troops to get ready to battle some honorable foes who he would really prefer to avoid. Plus, Huesca manages to keep the powers manageable, the levels manageable, and not have OPMCs. He does not have main characters or characters in general who really just blow up with their power. And I give him a lot of credit because this is kind of a slow build. It is a very slow build, and it's taking its time to get where it needs to, just as it should. I don't like it when stories, I can't say I don't like it, but I prefer it when stories don't just build up the guy instantly and have this superpowered guy running around, or this woman running around, stopping everything in their path. I like to see them struggle. I like to see them try to do things, and by like book 5, what gave them problems in book 1 should be a cakewalk. It should be a cakewalk. They should be able to go back and go to the same place and say, those little orcs, boink, and knock them the crap out. No problem. Whereas in book 1, they are struggling to fight the orcs. So, I really, really prefer that, the OPMCs don't exist here. And another benefit is, if you want to know the truth, I love how they do it with Sound Booth, is that you can jump the stats if you don't want to have all the crunch. If you do want the crunch, it's there, but if not, you can pass it up. The one real beef that I have with this book is that it repeatedly seems like Ed's old boss is going to get pulled into this world as a hero or some such in order to foil Ed. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe he's going to be another dungeon lord and he's going to be a competitor, but it just kind of comes back, and I think I don't like his boss at all, or it could even be his old gal pal, the one that could have potentially been a love interest or something. Honestly, I would stay away from them both. The reason being, his old boss reminds me of the villain from Awaken Online, who was arrogant and so full of himself that he's the best thing he's ever tasted. I'm so great. I'm delicious. I would eat me if it was me. He drinks his own Kool-Aid about how awesome he is. The possible former love interest is just not all that interesting. And in today's world, all she would have to do to kind of make it an accusation against her boss, and people will be looking into what her boss had said or done to make her so uncomfortable. So, like, that trope of, he kind of did this or that, and she's uncomfortable, and they're kind of being controlled by him. It doesn't really sing to me as much as it should. And it's just one of those things where I think that it's a toxic environment, and I hate characters like that just because there are so many ways to do it. Like, Ed literally dealt with it the best way you could do it. He punched the boss in the face and walked the hell out. No one else has done that so far, even though they've had a really good example of what to do in that situation. Jeff and Annie, they really, I say this all the time. Sound Booth, they are, for me, like the premier recorders, for narration, for sound editing, and for speaking. I mean, they are just like the best company in the world, because I don't know them having done any books that weren't great. I think my lowest score might have been like a 7.8 or a 7.9 for one of their books, and it was just because of issues of the book itself. Nothing to do with them. So they pick winners a lot. Like, they know how to say this book is going to be grand. And that's one of the most important parts of their job. So again, I'm always going to say, SBT does amazing work, and if when they get going, they just can't be touched, and it's really hard because there are other narrators out there who are really good, but SBT has this they're a level. There's just a level that's just amazing. Annie, she practically overwhelms with her feminine wiles, while simultaneously playing a whacked out ancient bloodsucker that looks like a 12-year-old. I don't know how she does it. That's got to be a hard way to speak, because they're refined and powerful, and at the same time they're a 12-year-old basically, physically. So you got to have this voice that commands, threatening, and also has a squeak to the voice. Don't mess with me, young man. I'll rip your face off. That's the best I could do. I can't stand it when you do this. That would not be the way to do it. And she does. She does really, really well. Jeff craftily carries the rest of the book with his narration, intense narration, and masterful manipulation of men and monsters. It's really fun to listen to him talk. Just absolutely top-notch performances all around. Fantastic production. The book really sets up at the end some really big things happening. Carolyn is there. He's got stuff happening. His god has some stuff happening. Edward has some stuff that he's figured out. And even though he kind of gets tricked at the end, he does kind of suss out one thing. It's really important that gives him an edge. Finally, he's got an edge, but he also has a lot of baggage with some of his assistants now. There's things that are in the mix that are dangerous to him. So I don't know. It's really hard to call, but I'm going to say this is like an 8.3 stars. It was good. The book continues to improve. The stakes are raised every time we draw to a close. And this is the first time I was really like, it was 19 hours. I wish I had 7 more. As much as I've enjoyed the other 2 books, I really wanted to see this carried on. Because we get to see them go on raids and do different things. This was the final thing that happens here with Edward. Really, really is a game changer, so to speak. And I really, really want to see what happens next. So there you go. 8.3 stars. Don't miss out. This is a great, great book.
Well, thank you for having watched the LitRPG Audiobook Dungeon Special. Before I go, one final thing we must do together. We must check in with our minions, the minions of madness. I summon the minions once more. Come, return to me now, minions. I ask you, did you cause mischief today? What did you do?
I ate the toenails off with juice.
And what did you do?
Steal the Muffin Man's bread.
You stole the Muffin Man's bread? And you ate the toenails off of a cat? Okay. Well, now you see the quality of my minions. Thank you for watching. And again, remember, there will be another naughty special just before Christmas. Really crazy around here.
Well, everybody, that is the conclusion of the Dungeon Special Part 3 for the Audiobook Podcast. I'm really sad to see this end. There are probably several other books I should have tried to get in here, but that was a lot. And I just kind of think I had to cull it at this point and cut it off, and we'll get to other dungeon books a little bit later, and I'll just do those in the show as normal. I try to keep a really good flow of things going for like specials. Like Halloween should be my holiday to do the dungeon special, and Christmas should be the time to do the naughty special. So we'll do stuff like that. And I just did the Wandering Inn special, and before that I had another special, the Armageddon. So I'm kind of specialed out, and I'm going to just kind of keep to the regular series for a little bit. Again, Christmas time we'll do a naughty special. But up until this point, we're good for dungeons for now. So I want to thank you all for watching and listening. I do appreciate you taking the time to watch or listen to the show. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed it. I mean, the dungeons are probably one of my favorite genres, so to speak. And I keep saying that word genre today. But it's just one of those things that I really love to have be a part of. I love to be a part of that. I love to experience it because the dungeons are a different perspective. They're not something I got in fantasy. 9 times out of 10 in fantasy, they were a place to go to and destroy or kill everything inside and just move on. They were loot boxes, loot crates, so to speak. So just bear that in mind. And before I go, I do want to just say, one thing. There are several books coming out. If you haven't noticed already, Jeffrey Falcon Logue has released Tales of Dungeons, which I'm a part of, and it's a good book. I'd like you to at least check that out if you like dungeons. It's not on audio yet. I don't know if it will ever make it to audio. I don't know if it will ever get to be put into a book format other than Kindle, but it's out there for you. I think it's got some really good stories to it. Another thing is that the Divine Dungeon anthology is out. If you haven't noticed that, it comes out in the beginning of November, so it'll be out right after this episode airs, a few days afterwards. And it was a fun thing, and I'm a part of that too. So I guess I'm promoting, but I want to let you know that it's not the end of the world for the Divine Dungeon. There are other stories that are in there, and they go on, they carry that torch that Dakota has passed on. So it's a fun read. I know that for me, I had a lot of fun writing the story for both the Tales of Dungeons and the Essence book. I really kind of got silly with them. And the great thing about it is in both cases, I sat down, and the only thing I knew I wanted to do was, like for Essence, I wanted to write a story about a goblin that was in Cal's dungeon. That was it. And I sat down, and from start to finish, I wrote that entire thing just as you see it. It just kind of told me how I wanted to go. And it was the same thing with the Tales of Dungeons, because I sat down, and the only thing I knew was I wanted a nature dungeon, and I knew there was going to be some sort of undead event happening in there to make a change. What the dungeon consisted of, how it happened, I had no clue. And I think that for me, my best writing comes when I don't know what I'm doing. I think that's the best part, is I like being surprised as much as you do, because I really had the dungeon book, the Tales of Dungeons. It was just, for me, it was like, how silly can I get? How much fun can I have? And I did the same thing with Essence. I said, for Splat, I just had to make this just something I would love to read, and I get to play in this playground, and if I get chosen, great. If I don't, I had fun. I'll make a few changes, and I'll put it out for myself. Splat has become one of my favorite characters because it's such a goofy thing, and I had some stupid moments to it. I had some funny moments to it, and so for those two books, they fit this genre, and I really think that you will like them both. I think they're really good novels. The people that, aside from myself, that are in them are really great writers. Like, for example, Dakota is in the Divine Dungeon Essence book. Jeffrey Falcon Logue is in the Tales of Dungeons, and so on and so forth. And, these are the masters. These are the people that brought us, today's show has been brought to you by the letters X and the number 1. Okay. The dungeon genre has been brought to us by Jeffrey Falcon Logue and Dakota Kraut. Not to say that it didn't exist in one capacity or another in the past, but these are the pioneers that really brought it to us. I think Brooks is coming up, and he is going to be one of those people that he has an indelible stamp on this genre. But like I say, those books have the masters in them. And since I'm kind of shamelessly promoting, I'm just going to come right out and say I also have a third book that I'm going to have out next month, which is Surviving Ludus, which is set in the world of Delvers LLC. And there I have a story about an orc. And it was a story literally that before I even went to the hospital, I think Blaze had been talking about possibly doing the anthology. And when I read the first Delvers book, there was something that he set up. And I said, I love that concept. I love that idea. And I had the character and everything in mind before I ever sat down to write it. And I had written it right after he talked about it. He had said something along the lines of, I think we may be doing a Delvers anthology. And I mean, like the next day I went out and sat down and wrote that story. And then when he made the announcement that he was accepting submissions, I sat on it. I probably sat on it for like 2.5 weeks, because I was like, should I, shouldn't I? I don't know. It was just really bizarre how I did that with that book, because every other book I was like, for Viridian Gate, I was like, I'm doing this. And again, that was just one of those books. I sat down, I started it. I knew it was about a spider. Didn't know how it was going to end. The only thing I knew was I wanted it to be one of those classics. The two things that people fight most in the game worlds are spiders and rats. And so I said, I want the spider to fight a rat. That was it. That was the whole story for me. That's all I knew going into it, and the whole story unfolded. So I have a really bad habit of doing that. I never know where I'm going or how I get there. I just know this is where I'm going to start, and this should be where I end. And what happens in between is as much a surprise as it is to me as it is for you. So with that, I was kind of stunned because I just decided not to put it in. And I just kept going back and forth. Should I submit? Shouldn't I submit? And finally, I just said, you know what? I've had this story in my head for far too long. I need to get it out there. And if Blaze likes it, great. So shameless self-promotion is over. I've got that book. If you like it, great. I think that it's going to be brilliant. I think that I can't wait to read what Blaze has for his story. So you've got 3 books out: Essence, Tales of Dungeons, and Surviving Ludus. I'm sure that in Surviving Ludus there's some sort of dungeon aspect to it that I think you would really enjoy. So just remember, if you've liked the show, please leave comments in the section below. Feel free to tell me whatever you like. I really do enjoy the feedback. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. So, again, thank you all for listening. I think this is just one of those things that needed to be done. I think the dungeon genre doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. And so, and it's perfect for Halloween. Perfect for it. So, I enjoyed it very much. So, I'm Ray, and keep listening.